As a content creator, I very often doubt myself. Make no mistake, when deciding to cover a certain topic and trying to advocate for a specific point of view, I have to try and be convincing, and that also often includes convincing myself. Getting biased in favor of something that I've spent a lot of time discussing among friends or things that I've researched a lot is definitely something that happens. The more I think about it, the more I start to feel like it is a good idea. But ultimately, in my videos, I'm trying to sell something to my audience. No, I'm not talking about these sponsored videos. I'm trying to sell my opinion, or alternatively, I'm just trying to sell a certain point of view. If I can't convince you guys to even bother giving a second thought to what I'm talking about, then what is even the point? I have to be convincing, or else this format does not work. I read a lot of comments on my own videos, but also outside of YouTube on a variety of social platforms. I try to stay connected to the community to best adjust my content to what is currently going on. And just yesterday, we got a massive developer update. In fact, probably one of the more important ones in recent memory. And I was honestly kind of astonished just how, well, spoken to I felt. The things that Jeff discussed in that video almost seemed like a direct response to a number of videos I made just recently. So could it be that Jeff is indirectly replying to my videos? Of course not. It's just something that I brought up so I could put it in my video title with a fat question mark alongside it. I am not yet delusional enough to suggest that a developer as massive as Blizzard Entertainment even knows of the existence of my channel. And the way that Jeff discussed these things definitely reflects that. Nonetheless, I felt very accomplished as a creator when watching this developer update. Not because I thought that my videos were being referenced, but because I felt like I did a good job of what I was trying to accomplish, staying in touch with what the community is largely concerned with. Only because I talk about something does not mean that I am the first to do that, and I'm probably not the last one. And that is a good thing, because constant discussion is what's keeping communities alive, among other things of course. Now, it is certainly very easy to approach all of this with a very cynical mindset, and you'd be right to assume that I would be the first to do that exact thing. It would be an easy task dismantling what has been said by constantly firing against it with more and more criticism, which is obviously a very futile exercise if the individual in question cannot respond to it. Putting aside my wet fever dreams of actually getting an interview with Jeff Kaplan, I want to take a few minutes of your life to talk about what has been discussed in the most recent developer update, given the fact that many topics I've discussed recently have been brought up. This is by all means not going to replace the actual developer update itself. I still recommend you go and watch it for yourself, as I will not bring up everything presented in it. To start this off, I want to dismiss criticism regarding the frequency in which they bother responding to the community. Not because I think it is not a valid point, but because it does not matter for our discussion today. Knowing how rarely we get to hear something from them, surely there are fans who appreciate every word we get ever the more. I am fairly certain that for a company as big as Blizzard, everything they share with the public has to be approved by someone to make sure that the overall ideals of Blizzard Entertainment are properly represented in every statement. While some people might be accepting of that fact, whether it actually is or is not one in this particular circumstance, reality is that the perception of the player base is relevant. I do encourage you to further express your dislike for their lack of responsiveness in hopes of them accelerating the process of getting these messages approved. A sense of urgency should definitely be there, because for the consumer, having to sit in the dark for so long at a time is just frustrating. Having addressed that in the very beginning, let's actually get this started. The first thing I want to bring your attention to is the fact that Blizzard proactively looks for incidents of bad behavior on YouTube to take action before any reports against those players are even filed in the first place. It seems like they share the philosophy that no matter the circumstance, letting out your frustration on strangers is not acceptable, even if it's online. In light of the fact that they do this kind of stuff proactively anyway, I do question that there's no way for us players to easily report others using video evidence. This topic was brought up in relation to toxicity, but surely clips from popular streamers that display hackers shamelessly ruining matches should have a platform to see action taken on them sooner. Next up on the chopping block will be Blizzard's balancing triangle, something that I do consider dedicating an entire video to, which is why I want to keep the point for this one short. It is something that they have vaguely brought up before, trying to make us realize that more goes into the decision of tuning heroes in the game than Reddit alone. The triangle refers to community feedback, hard facts in form of numbers, as well as the reflective experience of the employees participating in everyday matches on the live servers. What's very very interesting to me specifically is the fact that he brought up the perception of overall community agreement. It is something that I've talked about before as well. Depending on who we decide to surround ourselves with, our perception of what is right and what is wrong changes. I mean, I'm sure that if you step foot into a Mercy main Discord, that they would tell you a much different story about her current place in the game than many other sub-communities in Overwatch. There's no mutual agreement within 35 million players to basically anything. To a lot of us, it seems very obvious that something is too powerful and needs to be worked on, but to others, the opposite could be the case. And it is always easy to assume that our opinion is reflective of the majority of the community, because most people are very likely to seek out platforms that align with their own ideals. We prefer surrounding ourselves with like-minded people in an attempt to avoid confrontation and dispute, and that leads us to believe that what we think is always objectively right because everyone within our group agrees with us. Point being, when talking about the balancing triangle, it is not about each point respectively, but about how those points relate to each other. If something is objectively supposed to be fine according to statistics, but the community disagrees with that notion, then that is something that the developers have to look into. Sometimes that warrants in-game changes, and other times it solely begs for some readjustment when it comes to how something is communicated. Again, something that they brought up before, affecting the way something is perceived over actually changing something that is objectively supposed to be okay. What I found very interesting was the part where Jeff started to talk about Mercy in particular. Initially, I wanted to say that he seemed to have a lot of respect for the community, which is why the changes are taking as long as they do. But rewatching that bit, it almost feels like fear. Like the development team is afraid of the backlash that comes with the nerf of the, by far, most popular character in the game. However, it did seem very apparent that while they hesitate to change anything thanks to her current status as community favorite, they firmly believe that Mercy, in her current state, is simply too powerful, which is a bit of a relief. Now, we could discuss the fact that he downright promised that overtuned heroes, whether made too powerful or too weak, would be brought back in line eventually. That a change that does not feel right would not stick around. I obviously cannot deny that this is fact. They have proven time and time again that they are willing to revisit characters as many times as it takes to bring them back to a point where they are happy with them. I do, however, have to point out the fact that those changes are often taking very long to go through. Now, of course, we could say that we should prefer them taking their time to do it properly over rushing in to make half-baked changes, but I do think that the effectiveness and frequency of their balance changes could be adjusted if they only utilize the PTR in more ways than simply as a marketing tool. Not to mention that many players grow tired of their bulldozer type changes that come once every few months, and many voice their preference for gradual tweaks in shorter intervals. And I wish I'd know their stance on that philosophy, because they are obviously making smaller tweaks alongside of those bulldozer changes, but since they come in packages, it still extends the overall time that we spend dealing with those problems in game. And ultimately, I want to bring up their stance on the culture of maining and one-tricking. In one of my more recent videos talking about hero viability, I've tried to explore the connection between a hero's effectiveness and the way maps have been designed relative to the abilities given to their characters. Personally, I think that video turned out reasonably well and sparked some really good discussion in the comments, so if you want to check that out, I'll pop in a card in the top right corner. However, the important part is that the developers, as I've suggested in that video, never intended for players to fall into those behaviors. The maps were, in fact, designed with hero swaps in mind, and Jeff highlights the fact that deciding to be a one-trick would mean that you're putting yourself and your team at a disadvantage. Now, obviously, this is the very part that I felt spoke to me the most, and personal bias will tell you why. If you watch that video of mine and then go back to this developer update, you'll come to realize that he references a lot of the things that I brought up in my video. And that makes me incredibly happy, because to me, that means that I've hit the nail on the head when it comes to bringing up things that are more largely discussed in the community. I mean, the video has like 6,500 views, chances of him actually referencing it are right about 0. Anyway, point being that begging for hero changes based on a lack of overall viability is not necessarily reasonable, because Jeff has confirmed that some heroes were made to be situational and fill a niche. So if I wanted to take that a bit further, being a Symmetra hero-centric and saying that it's not your fault for performing poorly, but saying that the developers should make her more viable is absolute nonsense. Logically confirmed by the developers, you are supposed to swap, and heroes are not meant to always be viable, not even in the majority of circumstances. Some heroes are just meant to be situational. I want to wrap this video up with the following. It is always easy to succumb to your frustration. I know that more than anyone else. As someone who literally makes a living talking about Overwatch, seeing this game in a problematic state for so long is beyond frustrating, and I never made a secret out of that. That does not mean that I want to overall only approach the game in a cynical fashion. Yes, my frustration is reflected in my content, but in many videos I don't just point out problems for the heck of it. I do it in an attempt to spark discussion because I believe that to be the only way to improve the game, and that is ultimately what I care about when making these types of videos. I don't want to bash Overwatch, I want it to be the best version of itself that it can be. With that said, I do realize that there's a lot of bias coming from my side given the very fact that I spent so ungodly many hours essentially living Overwatch and that it contributes to a sense of burnout. It is something that I'm looking to fix, but that does not mean that I want to abandon Overwatch. Not at all. Judging by the comments, I know that many of you are just as frustrated as me, but I ask of you to not solely look for things to lash out on. Yes, their development process feels very slow to many of us, and yes, it is aggravating to play when the game is in a bad spot and having them not say a word to us for months. But developer updates like this are why we keep discussing all these issues, to finally get the response that we ask for. And once we do, shouldn't we appreciate that, rather than looking to fault them for every word they say? I guess ultimately that's for you to decide, so I'm gonna call it a day as I talk about the most recent developer update for Overwatch. Feel free to leave all of your thoughts down in the comment section below, but don't forget to drop me a like on your way out while you're down there anyway if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I hope to see you all next time.